So now looking at demerit goods, remember merit goods were where consumers were unaware of how beneficial the product was for them. So I think you can probably guess from that what demerit goods are, but just to go through the specification objectives, we need to be able to define demerit goods. We need to understand why overconsumption of demerit goods leads to market failure, and just a brief overview of some of these. We're not going to kind of evaluate these because you're going to get detailed information in the presentations on these that are in other videos. Okay, so demerit good are goods or services, I suppose, that their consumption is more harmful than is actually realised. So there's more private costs to the consumer or the person making the decision than they actually realise that there is, and again caused by information failure. So maybe overly persuasive advertising or misleading information, or just the information doesn't really exist. So we don't really know whether something's good for us or bad for us and those types of things, because there haven't been enough medical experiments. Okay, so one demerit good that's spoken about in a case study a while ago was red meat, and people go, you know, on and on about how red meat is bad for you and all those types of things. And one of the reasons that you could say there's market failure is because people don't realise how bad it is for them, so they overconsume the product. But it was actually a comment on question in the exam, and what you could say is it really a demerit good? Do people not know that red meat's bad for them? Because, you know, it must be in like the Daily Mail every week or something like that. Not that I read the Daily Mail, but yeah, so maybe, you know, it's like when people say to people that are smoking, you know, you shouldn't do that, you know, it kills you. And someone that's smoking might say, oh, really? I've never heard that before. They're being sarcastic because, of course, they've heard that before. It's everywhere. We know that smoking is bad for you. We know that drinking is bad for you. We know mostly that red meat isn't that good for you. And there's a link between some forms of cancer. So is the reason that some people are consuming it because they don't realise the harmful effects? Or is it just because maybe they just don't have very much self-control and they're just like, oh, stuff it, I'm just gonna, you know, live on the wild side and eat my steak and drink a pint of wine and, you know, smoke? And, you know, is it that it's they're demerit goods, or is it just that they want to? They're fully aware of the harmful effects, but they just don't care. So some demerit goods I've named for you: alcohol, cigarettes, red meat, and those types of things. Now, they tend to occur with negative externalities as well. Negative externalities in consumption, probably, these things. But there's no theoretical reason why they have to occur simultaneously, but they do tend to occur. So how do you decide if it's a demerit good? Well, there has to be, the key fact has to be information failure that's gone on. So, you know, it can't just be something that's bad for you. There's got to be some information failure that people don't realise it's bad for them. So here, I found this a few years ago in a medical journal, The Lancet, about harmful drugs, and it includes alcohol and cigarettes on here as well, which is very interesting. But harm to the users, the blue part represents how harmful it is to the users. So the blue represents that these are, you know, harmful, but I mean, some of these I don't even know what they are. But you know what is really surprising is that some of the most harmful things, you know, here, this one, tobacco, which is obviously legal, has kind of actually a smaller harmful effect on the body. I don't know what the parameters were for this. I'm not advocating that anybody, you know, takes this as advice on how to live their life, but tobacco seems to be much more harmful to the person than cannabis is. So that's, you know, that's something I didn't know. I mean, it doesn't mean I'm going to run out and smoke either of those two things, but there's a bit of information failure going on there. So that's quite an interesting thing. But also linking back to a lesson previously about negative externalities, we've also got the external costs, the harm to others. And look at alcohol, it's so high, these external costs to other people. So very interesting to look at this diagram of the element of, if you didn't realize that these were as high as they are, and look at that, crack cocaine, very, very harmful for people. To be honest, I didn't know, I don't really know the difference between crack cocaine and heroin, but I wasn't aware that crack cocaine was more harmful than heroin. I'd have thought it would have been heroin, but so, real demerit, information failure going on there. Okay then, so why are they a type of market failure? Well, if you don't know how bad something is for you, you overconsume it. If you've got information failure, it leads to overconsumption. And this means that too many scarce resources are allocated to production, which is allocatively inefficient. So what solutions might we have to dealing with demerit goods? Well, we could have an indirect tax. We know that indirect taxes increase the cost of production. This shifts supply inwards. This puts upwards pressure on the price, and this causes a movement along the demand curve. And I should have put another line in there really and said that this reduces the equilibrium quantity, and that's what you want to do. You want to reduce the overproduction, overconsumption. We could put regulation on it and limit or restrict the supply, or we could provide information, just like that diagram there is very informative about how harmful some of these things are. And I think in terms of drugs, there was a few years ago a BBC initiative, Talk to Frank, I think it was called, and that provided a lot of information on the harmful effects of drugs as well, and I think that's very informative and may have been able to change some people's behaviour. Okay, so demerit goods, where the private costs are greater than people realise, so it's more harmful. This leads to overconsumption because of the information failure, and this means that there's too many scarce resources used up in production. And we can use indirect taxes, we can use regulation, and we can provide information to try and solve this overconsumption, overproduction.